Top 30 quarterback dynasty rankings, including rookies, breaking it down tier by tier, having conversations essentially with myself and with you. So make sure you comment down below as I'm giving my thought process through each and every one of these players. Let's not waste any more time. Going straight into my first tier. Keep in mind, this is PPR Superflex rankings and scorings, all right? Tier 1, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, and CJ Stroud. Three of these foundational pillar pieces, guys that are essentially costing 3 firsts right now and more in the dynasty community. Josh Allen has continually being the #1 quarterback in dynasty for the past 2 years. Patrick Mahomes coming off of a down season. If you really think about it, finished QB8, not really, finishing with those fantasy points that we were hoping for. 18.4 fantasy points per game. That is a huge bump compared to Josh Allen with 24.2 fantasy points per game. And then CJ Stroud coming out of his rookie year, honestly breaking records left and right and making these players around him fantasy relevant. Finishing as QB11, 18.7 fantasy points per game. That is more than Patrick Mahomes by obviously 3 points. So it's not that big of a difference, but these are my top 3 QB3s, foundational players that you should be getting in your dynasty leagues. Going into my tier 2, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, and Joe Moneybags Burrow. All 3 of these guys could be arguably going into the tier 1, just depending on how you view these guys. But look, let's break it down from the start. Lamar Jackson, this past year, QB4, stayed healthy all of 2023, which is exciting. And this is the type of production you can get on a week in and week out basis. 21.1 fantasy points per game. And keep in mind, he was missing Mark Andrews in the second half of that season, which really hindered his upside when he wasn't on the field here. Now you have Zay Jones, Mark Andrews, Derrick Henry, which is going to open up a lot of opportunities for someone like a Lamar Jackson. Now, this offense having a run threat. Think about it. J.K. Dobbins was the quote-unquote run threat for the past couple of years, struggling with that injuries, the ACL, the Achilles. You have Gus Edwards, who had a decent year, no question about it, but he's not the threat that you have to stack the boxes with now Derrick Henry in the backfield. So that's exciting. Jalen Hurts coming into this year, my QB4. Now, the biggest question with Jalen Hurts and a lot of people's concerns is this tush push. Obviously, the tush push is not going to be banned, but he still should be producing the same amount of fantasy points coming in, even with Saquon Barkley. And I think that is the next biggest, asterisk on Jalen Hurts' production, right? This past year, rushing touchdowns, 15 rushing touchdowns, tied with Josh Allen in those opportunities on the goal line. Is that going to be the same now with Saquon Barkley, one of the best running backs in the NFL? They had DeAndre Swift, they had Rashad Penny, they had the Trey Sermons, they had the Miles Sanders. Now you double tier up, paying Saquon Barkley, giving him a bag for 3 years. Is Jalen Hurts going to have those 21.9 fantasy points per game coming into 2024? I would say he's still in conversation of being a top 4 in the dynasty community, but that is something that, we're all going to have to try and figure out when the time does come. Now, my QB6 in my rankings, Joe Moneybag Burrows. Obviously, the past couple of years hasn't been exactly what we were hoping for. This past year in 2023, still averaging 15.3 fantasy points per game. That's 21 on the ranked 21st, in fantasy points per game. He did miss 7 games in the second half of the season or throughout the season, which really hindered him. There's no question in my mind that we can see that 2022 Joe Burrow, who finished QB4, and he was averaging 21.7 fantasy points per game. He still has his weapons and the opportunity for him to improve. And now, not only does the weapons improve, if you were to argue with Jermaine Burton, right? But there is still opportunity for this offense to open up here with Jamar Chase, T. Higgins still on this team so far, and now a new addition in Jermaine Burton coming out of Alabama there for Joe Moneybags. All right, going into tier 3. I think both of these guys could easily be in tier two. And I think a lot of recency bias has been skewed for both of these guys. And we've seen both of these guys go for absolute, I feel like, pennies when it does come down to the fantasy community right now. And we have to keep that in mind when I am bringing my rankings and how you can potentially getting value for each and every one of these players. Justin Herbert and Kyler Murray. Let me just tell you, in the community right now, Justin Herbert QB9, Kyler Murray QB 18, and that is according to Keep Trade Cut as I am recording this currently right now. Obviously, things can change. Now, the biggest concern with someone like a Justin Herbert is his new offense. Jim Harbaugh, right? What's going to be happening with this offense is this going to be more of a run-heavy offense, right? They don't draft a top wide receiver. They solidify the offensive line and getting Joe Alt, their best weapon on this offense. In a lot of people's eyes, well, no question, is Lam McConkey. They get him in the second round. You have Quentin Johnston. He doesn't have that wide receiver core that he had around him before. He was going from Keenan Allen to Mike Williams to Josh Palmer. Now he's going to Lam McConkey, Quentin Johnston, and Josh Palmer. There's a lot of concerns, lingering around Justin Herbert, and if this offense is going to be more of a run heavy and he is not going to be slinging the ball like he was going to be with the Kellen Moore type of offense that we've seen in the past, anything can happen. But what we did see, he still finished as a top 20 quarterback this past year, averaging 18.6 fantasy points per game. That's pretty decent for somebody coming off of an injury or struggling with injuries, essentially missing fingers in that, missing a couple fingers in that hand, because that was his biggest injury coming into this past year. So Justin Herbert, I do believe, is completely and significantly underrated. He was 8th in fantasy points per game amongst quarterbacks. So he's still scoring top 10 per game or per quarterback. Sorry, top 10 per game. You're right. Per quarter, in the quarterback position there. English is hard, as always, as a Badaki video. You got to love it there. Kyler Murray, obviously the next quarterback on this list. I truly believe another guy, once again, on Keep Trade Cut, QB 11. The absolute disrespect. And you guys have known me. I call Kyler Murray the cockroach because he just gives me the ick the way he plays, but I still will draft him because of his fantasy production. And what do we know about Kyler Murray and what he can do and what he's done in the past? Obviously, coming off that ACL tear, let me tell you this. Outside of his rookie year, and obviously this past year, he has finished as a top 7 quarterback, right? In 2019, his rookie year, QB 11. In 2020, in fantasy points per game, right? In 2020, QB3, averaging 24.4 fantasy points per game. In 2021, 22.2 fantasy points per game. That was his highest finish in 4th, right? Well, not highest finish, but you get what I'm saying, in the fantasy points per game. Kyler Murray has the history of being successful, and a lot of people are not taking that to account because of the recency bias with that ACL injury. And I think that is the biggest concern when we really think about Kyler Murray. In 2022, obviously, he finished as QB2. We have to remember Kyler Murray, and not what happens now. He gets Marvin Harrison Jr. He gets Trey Benson. He has Michael Wilson. Now, he doesn't have the wide receiver core with DeAndre Hopkins and a Hollywood Brown like he did, but he has Marvin Harrison Jr., which was the best wide receiver prospect that a lot of people have seen in a long time. A lot of people saying since Julio Jones, right? I mean, he was just like a spitting image of his father. A lot of people say a lot bigger, a better route runner. I mean, and we're still getting Kyler Murray as QB 11 in the Dynasty community. This is an absolute steal right now if you can go out and try to acquire him in a super flex league. All right, going into my tier 4. I do have 4 quarterbacks in tier 4. Okay, Caleb Williams, Jordan Love, Anthony Richardson, and Jaden Daniels are my next 4 quarterbacks in my tier 4. And starting off with Caleb Williams, right? The best prospect, or people that have been comparing since Patrick Mahomes, the opportunity and the team that he's landing with: Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, Rome Odunze. They have DeAndre Swift. This offensive line gets better, right? I mean, Caleb Williams is arguably going into one of the best landing spots a rookie quarterback has ever gone to. And that's what's exciting about Caleb Williams. Projecting him to be easily finishing as a top 10 quarterback or top 12 quarterback in his rookie year is not out of the question. He's currently QB 7 in the community. I mean, that is absolutely crazy. And he's ahead of Justin Herbert and Kyler Murray. I can understand maybe people want to reset the market there because of the age, right? Caleb Williams coming in as 22 years old, uh, and Justin Herbert 26, Kyler Murray 26. But what we have to remember is that Caleb Williams is not proven. Caleb Williams, I'm not saying he is, but he could easily bust coming into this, and he may be a crazy number one overall pick that no one was expecting that has all the weapons around him. So keep that in mind when you are thinking of Caleb Williams and all these other guys. Going to my next guy here in my tier 4 is Jordan Love, coming out of nowhere, struggled in the first half of the season, but finished as a top 5 quarterback this past year, 19.4 fantasy points per game. Look, and this offense, once again, only gets better, right? Can Christian Watson stay healthy? You have Luke Musgrave, Jaden Reed, Dontayvion Wicks that people love, Romeo Dobbs, and then you get Josh Jacobs here in this offense. Jordan Love, another year in this backfield, him leading this offense. I mean, my guy went into the Dallas Cowboys and was slinging it as if nothing was actually happening, as if it was just another, hey boys, let's go to the park and play some ball. That is a Jordan Love that you could potentially be getting here in your rookie rankings, no doubt about it. And keep in mind, he's only 25 years old, younger than Kyler Murray, younger than Justin Herbert, younger than a lot of these quarterbacks here in the top tier outside of CJ Stroud. Keep that in mind. Youth is still there, and he still has a lot of football to be played. Anthony Richardson, one of my more concerning prospects here in quarterbacks in this tier 4, just purely based off of can he produce at the next level as a passer. Now, I can absolutely guarantee that Anthony Richardson can easily finish as a top 10, even top 5 quarterback because of his athleticism, because of the way he can be utilized on the ground and he can utilize those legs, right? Anthony Richardson, he has the opportunity, right? I mean, we saw it this past year, only in the 2 games he played, he had 4 rushing touchdowns. Now, the passing opportunity was not amazing, right? The completion rate, 59.5 completion rate. He was averaging 18.4 fantasy points per game, which is great for a mobile quarterback. I am not, and I think I'm going to get roasted for this in the comments here. I'm not comparing him to Justin Fields. I'm just saying I'm a little bit concerned if Anthony Richardson could have the same upbringing or potential fantasy outlook when it comes down to Justin Fields, like when it comes down to Justin Fields and Anthony Richardson, right? Can Anthony Richardson take his passing game to the next level? What was a lot of people's biggest concern with Justin Fields is that he can't pass the ball. His touch, his accuracy, the way he reads the field is not there. Now, we didn't have that, that sample size of Anthony Richardson in this league with the 4 games, really 2.5 games that he played. So I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt, and there's no excuses either. Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman Jr., Josh Downs, and you just drafted Adonai Mitchell, who fell to you in the 2nd round. There's no excuses for Anthony Richardson to not produce, specifically as a passer, but as a rusher. This is why he's in the top tier for me. He's in top tier for a top 10 quarterback in my rankings, which is exciting. And in a lot of people's in the Dynasty community right now, Anthony Richardson is QB8. And that's ahead of Jordan Love. That's ahead of Justin Herbert. That's ahead of Kyler Murray. I have all those guys clearly ahead of Anthony Richardson compared to the community here. Talking about mobility and pass accuracy, Jaden Daniels brings that as well. What's exciting about Jaden Daniels, and Zach has been preaching this all off season, especially on his Twitter. Tell us what's the difference outside of size for Anthony Richardson and Jaden Daniels. Yes, Anthony Richardson has the big body build, the best quarterback build, I would say, since Cam Newton. There's no question. But can he produce as a passer? Can he not rely on his athleticism and be the passer? Jaden Daniels can do that. I don't know if Anthony Richardson can. And once again, we say this now because of what we've seen coming out of college. Out of college, Jaden Daniels is the better passing quarterback. Anthony Richardson is the better mobile quarterback, more physical, more athletic quarterback. Keep that in mind. Jaden Daniels, what is the true difference? Please comment down below. Once again, Zach has been saying it. I think I would agree with him, right? I think both of these guys aren't too far apart outside of the big physique that Anthony Richardson brings. But I do believe Jaden Daniels' ceiling is higher than Anthony Richardson based off that he can be a rushing quarterback and a passing quarterback. Before I get into my next tier, guys, go to flockfantasy.com/land, the best place to support what we are doing here. If you want to get our rankings like you're seeing in this video for each and every position, if you want to get our 2024 final rookie report, if you want to get the fantasy hotline, the Dynasty trade show, and so much more, all you have to do is sign up at flockfantasy.com, get 30% off at sign up, and use that promo code LAND, and you can unlock everything that you are seeing currently on your screen right now. Once again, it is the best way to get what we are doing here. Not only that, you can get your Dynasty team reviewed by Zach and myself. We break it down. We tell you the trades that you can make, the trades you shouldn't make, who you should be drafting in your rookie drafts, and so much more. Appreciate each and every one of you. Let's get straight into my next tier, which is tier 5. Trevor Lawrence, Brock Purdy, Drake May, and J.J. McCarthy. A lot of people say, blasphemy. I can't believe Trevor Lawrence is in tier 5. Blasphemy. What is happening with Trevor Lawrence? Why isn't he a tier 3 or tier 4 quarterback? I understand. My biggest concern with Trevor Lawrence is, can he take it to the next level? Yes, we've seen him finish as a top quarterback 1 year. Right? If I'm not mistaken, it wasn't last year, it was the year before. If I'm not mistaken, it was it was last year, QB8 in 2022. When I say last year, I mean 2 years ago now, which is crazy to think about. 2022 finished QB8, averaging 17.9 fantasy points per game. 2023 finishes as a QB13. Obviously, he didn't finish the whole season. Has 17.3 fantasy points per game. Now, there's also no excuses with Trevor Lawrence. One of the biggest things coming into last year was that Trevor Lawrence is going to catapult with such a talent in Calvin Ridley. That just wasn't the case. Calvin Ridley didn't produce and do the things that we were hoping for coming into the 2023 season. Maybe they weren't on the same page, whatever the case may be. Christian Kirk gets hurt. The list goes on. Now you have another top wide receiver, Brian Thomas Jr., who we all love, with Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, Travis Etienne. Can Trevor Lawrence catapult himself back into a top 10 fantasy finish? I'm not necessarily sure. And I think that is my biggest concern. And especially when you compare the numbers, and I keep saying this on our live streams, in so many different scenarios, if you put the numbers next to each other with Trevor Lawrence and Daniel Jones, there's concerns. There are huge concerns. And we've seen the progression, but we haven't seen the consistency. And I think that is the biggest thing when we think of Trevor Lawrence here going into this fantasy season. A lot of people may disagree, and that's okay. Second guy here for me is Brock Purdy. I would arguably say, you know what? I'm actually going to move Brock Purdy ahead of Trevor Lawrence in this video live right now. I would rather have Brock Purdy than Trevor Lawrence, especially with this foundation of a team and Kyle Shanahan and the weapons around Brock Purdy. I mean, even if Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk walks, I believe in the talent of Ricky Pearsall. I believe in Christian McCaffrey. I believe in this offensive line. I believe in the coaching staff that has been progressing Brock Purdy to come out of the woodworks in 2023. I mean, we have to understand Brock Purdy in a very limited amount of fashion the year before. In the second half of the season, when Jimmy G goes down and Trey Lance wasn't the guy, Brock Purdy, in that second half of the season, he was a top 12 quarterback within those weeks. This year, he does that in a consistent basis, finishes a QB8 and QB6, 19.2 fantasy points per game. Brock Purdy is up there, okay? And I think that's what's exciting about Brock Purdy is the weapons around him and what he could be doing with those opportunities and how consistent he is going to be. Then you have the two rookie quarterbacks in Drake May and J.J. McCarthy. Now, the argument could definitely easily be, hey, J.J. McCarthy should be going ahead of Drake May. I can understand because of the weapons around him. I like Drake May as a talent more in the situation. I do believe they brought enough weapons around him and Jalen Polk and Javon Baker, who are both two underrated wide receivers. J.J. McCarthy is just going into proven talent, which is the difference here. But I do believe Drake May is the overall better talent over JJ McCarthy. I would say when you're looking at both of those guys, doesn't matter which way you go. I can understand. I've seen JJ McCarthy go ahead in rookie drafts, and I've seen Drake May go ahead in rookie drafts. Pick your poison. All right, going into tier 6, guys that I love as well. Dak Prescott, Tua Tags, Jared Goff, and Bryce Young here. And this is a good tier when it comes down to QB2 veteran quarterbacks that we believe are going to have contract extensions and or rookie guys like you can see in Bryce Young that we believe could easily take the next step, right? I mean, we'll keep it simple with Dak Prescott. He's going to continue to do his thing as long as he's on the Dallas Cowboys. I think if he does get off the Dallas Cowboys, there might be a little bit more things to reconsider. But Tua Tag, the top 10 quarterback finished this past year with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Devon, and Raheem Mostert. The list kind of goes on in talent. I believe in Tua and what he can do, especially once he gets this contract extension. Where does he move up to because of the youth, right? We have to understand Tua Tags is only 26 years old, so the youth also could potentially catapult him maybe a spot or two, depending on how these rookie quarterbacks perform. And for example, Drake May and JJ McCarthy. Jared Goff gets a contract extension, has a phenomenal supporting cast around him, and that's exactly what you want to see here. Top 7 quarterback finish, gets that contract extension, like I mentioned, 17.8 fantasy points per game, and is only going to improve as the year goes on. Now, he is an old quarterback, but if you're in a win now situation, or maybe a team that is kind of pivoting, maybe a hybrid team, a win now / young team, Jared Goff is a perfect quarterback here to definitely keep him in the loop. Currently QB 16 in, according to Keep Trade Cut, 29 years old. So definitely very interesting there. And Bryce Young, this is somebody I am trying to acquire everywhere based off the price, especially based off of the community price. Not a lot of people are believing in Bryce Young. He's QB 20 right now. And if I'm not mistaken, he is QB 20 in my rankings as well. Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I don't want to count it too much. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but Bryce Young is somebody that we both believe has done great things in his rookie year. He just didn't have the right people around him. Now he has, David Canellis coming from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and we saw how he kind of just flipped Baker Mayfield and genuinely produced Baker Mayfield to a top 10 quarterback, the highest finishing year he's ever had in his career. So keep that in mind. That's what David Canellis is now hopefully going to do with Bryce Young going into the 2024 season. And what does this team do? Gets him a better supporting cast. One of the biggest arguments is this team has no separation. They go out and get one of the best separators, underrated separators in Deontay Johnson. You still have Adam Thielen, who was a top 10, top 12 wide receiver at some point in the season, right? And then you get Xavier Leggett, who I love, I also believe is underrated, who, once again, we've seen Dave Canellis utilize a big body wide receiver like a Mike Evans. Now an Xavier Leggett, nowhere near the talent, but can he play that same role in this offense with getting one of the best running backs in this draft class in Jonathan Brooks, investing in the offensive line? Bryce Young, completely underrated, especially in a super flex league where quarterbacks, more than half of the quarterbacks, if I'm not mistaken, 16, 17 quarterbacks were injured last year alone. And Bryce Young was somebody that maybe he didn't win you the championship, but at least he got you 10, 15, 17 fantasy points per game this past year. So I love all these guys in tier 6. All right, going into tier 7, Brother Bo, Deshaun Watson, Baker Mayfield, Kirk Cousins, Will Levis, and Michael Penix Jr. A lot of people aren't going to like where I have Michael Penix Jr. Let's start there. I get it. Top 10 draft capital. When is he going to play? I always say this, if you are in a rebuilding team, Michael Penix is the perfect quarterback for your dynasty team. But if you are competing, I don't see when or why you should be going out and getting and drafting Michael Penix, because it's not going to fit your timeline. It's not going to fit maybe the build of your team. Okay. Bo Nix as my first quarterback in tier 7. I think he's completely underrated. A lot of people don't like Bo Nix. I have drafted multiple Bo Nix as a top 8 pick in my rookie drafts here. And the opportunity with Sean Payton, Troy Franklin coming in, and him investing in a first-round quarterback, top 12 draft capital, is completely significant when you think of the fantasy hit rates of a first-round quarterback. And that's what's exciting about Bo Nix, because he's going to have 4 years, a fresh start with Sean Payton, who can easily catapult this guy to the next level. Deshaun Watson, another guy who we've seen limited amount of games, but when we saw him on the field, Deshaun Watson was producing in a rate that I was not expecting, right? We have to understand that Watson, 15.2 fantasy points per game. Now, that may be underrated, but when you look at the 2 games that he played fully, he was averaging over 22 points per game, which is very, very exciting here. Baker Mayfield, look, I don't want to spend too much time on Baker, but with Dave Canellis out, what is this offense going to look like? Kirk Cousins could easily be a top finishing quarterback, especially with that supporting cast. We saw him finish as a top 7 quarterback in 2022. And Will Levis, I think, is a good dart throw wild card in where he is going to be finishing coming into this year. We saw some glimpses of this team, but now he has Calvin Ridley. You get rid of Derrick Henry. He has more offensive weapons, and this offense is going to open up, especially with the offensive coordinator coming from the Cincinnati Bengals, which is very, very exciting. All right, the last tier on this list, tier A, I like to call this tier, you have a quarterback. At least you have a quarterback, okay? Matthew Stafford, Aaron Rodgers, Geno Smith, Justin Fields, Daniel Jones, Russell Wilson, Aiden O'Connell, Gardner Minshew, and Derek Carr are the last guys. I don't want to spend too much time on these guys. I would say this: Matthew Stafford, Aaron Rodgers, and Geno Smith are 3 good veteran quarterbacks that should have decent fantasy production coming into this year, especially someone like an Aaron Rodgers who's coming off of that Achilles tear. I mean, we saw the hype of all of 2023 before the season started. That's going to continue and rolling into 2024, and he can easily produce with Garrett Wilson. Now he has Breece Hall, a year removed from that ACL tear, and now Malachi Corley with Mike Williams there, which is exciting. Geno Smith, a guy that I brought in the video saying needs to give him a second chance. Another guy a year removed from finishing as a top 5 quarterback in 2022. Phenomenal year for Geno Smith that year. And not only does this offense get better with the additions that we've seen with Jackson Smith and Jigba this past year, but with the offensive coordinator and Ryan Grubb coming out of Washington, who has produced top fantasy relevant wide receivers, or at least we hope producing top fantasy relevant wide receivers coming into this year. Justin Fields, I have him here just because if he does get a starting point in the second half of the season, the rushing upside is there. Same thing with Daniel Jones. Is he going to be ready for week 1? If he does ready for week 1, another guy just a year, I guess 2 years removed from finishing as a top 9 quarterback and being a top 5 rushing quarterback that year. I mean, keep that in mind as well. Russell Wilson, what's going to happen with him? Can he stay healthy? Aiden O'Connell, Gardner Minshew. If you have both of these guys locked up in the backfield or in the quarterback room, you're happy. We had to figure out who's going to be the starter. I think it's going to be Aiden O'Connell, but a lot of people believe in Gardner Minshew. I think they want to go with the youth first to see how he's going to pan out the way he finished last year. And Derek Carr, I mean, at least you got him just in case, right? I mean, not a sexy quarterback that you want in your lineup whatsoever. Just absolutely dead in the water. I think the Saints needs to get rid of him as soon as possible here. Guys, that is my top 35 plus quarterbacks Dynasty for 2024. Comment down below once again how you feel about it, what conversations we can have, how you feel about Anthony Richardson, how you feel about Bryce Young, how you feel about Michael Penix. I don't care what you do, just be nice. And as always, it's all love.
Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, L-A-N-D, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy, even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.